Okay, here's the introduction. We're doing pheromones, you know, right? Pheromones, pheromones. Pheromones are exocrine secretions, you know, versus endocrine, right? Exocrine. So it's going to come out some duct or be in some body fluid that escapes the animal or that can escape the animal. But before I go specifically into pheromones, I've got to talk about the two olfactory systems of the mammal, especially our animals. So olfactory, right? O-L-F-A-C-T-O-R-Y, olfactory systems. There's a main and then there's accessory. And anatomically, I'll show them to you on this diagram that I found thanks to my textbook Google. But the main olfactory system smells regular things like bacon and wet dog smell, right? You know, or cat poop. Am I being colorful enough? And you can basically sense it and say, I smell this. The main olfactory system tends to be, I'm doing the diagram now, tends to be caudal and dorsal. Caudal means back, and dorsal in the nasal cavity means up here. So the main olfactory system is caudal and dorsal. The accessory olfactory system, and we're going to call it the vomeronasal organ, and I will show this other places, tends to be, listen to this, rostral and ventral. When you're in the head, you can't use cranial. You cannot use cranial when you're in the head already. So rostral means towards the nares, and ventral is here. So I'm pointing out the vomeronasal organ. Obviously, they're all neural sensors, so they're going to send afferent nerve messages to some part of the brain. Okay, this is all neural. But I guess you could also call them chemoreceptors. Okay? And this diagram doesn't show it really well, but the vomeronasal organ sometimes is exposed to what air comes in the nares. Okay? But sometimes there's a passageway down to the mouth. So some animals, and somebody that's studying this all the time would say this animal has an opening to the nares, this animal has an opening to the mouth. I never can keep them track, so it doesn't really matter. They're here. But sometimes what comes in the mouth is detected by the vomeronasal organ. The main olfactory system tends to be open and exposed to what's ever coming into the nose. The vomeronasal organ tends to be like a cigar-shaped structure that's closed on one end. So think of a cigar that's been hollowed out, and one end of it is open, but the other end is not open. And the end that's open tends to be rostral. Remember, when you're in the head, you can't use cranial, you use rostral. So the open end tends to be rostral, and the closed end is caudal. And then sometimes the animal needs help getting air into the vomeronasal organ. And sometimes we see this. And what, if you work with cattle, sheep, horses, it's hard to say, I've ever seen it in pigs, but what's the posture that they display?
The Flehmen response?
Yeah, the Flehmen response. And it's usually spelled capital F, F-L-E-H-M-E-N. The Flehmen response, the Flehmen posture, I've also heard it. And supposedly one theory is that act draws air into the vomeronasal organ. That's cigar-shaped and only open on one end. Okay, something has to be done to get air into that area. So that's the Flehmen response. Okay, so let me get rid of this. And There's spelling for vomeronasal, so right, if you're not a big speller like I'm not. The vomeronasal organ, the vomeronasal system detects pheromones, and I think I'm just not really excited about that. The rest of that article. Hi guys. Okay. So now here is the thinking of the vomeronasal organ. Let's see. And hi, little girl. Hi. You are good. We've got a treat here for you. Okay, so this looks like a cow. And what we're talking about, even from the way they've drawn it, I'm not sure if that's opening in the mouth. It might be. And you could look this up for every animal. I never try to remember it. And it looks like it is because they're going to draw in material. They've got an arrow there into the vomeronasal organ. And it's closed end on that side, so it's like a dead end. But when they do that posture, then you get the pheromone drawn into the, and I'm going to find a better picture of the Flehmen response. There's a horse doing it. Flehmen response. Kind of looks weird if you're not used to it. Not used to seeing animals do that. Okay. All kinds of stuff here. And so, how is this useful in our domestic animals? Okay, so they're detecting these pheromones. Supposedly, in another theory before I move on, is a pheromone is species specific. So, like, I'm going to talk about bulls. If a bull has a pheromone, it'll affect cattle species, but it really won't have an effect on other animals, other species. Okay? That's not to say it can't be detected, because they've done experiments with dogs where they've collected urine from, let's say, heifers that are not in estrus. Let's say you have 5 bowls of urine on the floor, and 4 are from heifers that are not in estrus. And then the 5th bowl is from a heifer in estrus. You can train a dog to detect the urine that came from an estrus heifer. Okay? So now they're detecting the pheromones that are coming from the urine, but it's not really going to have any effect on the dog, right? So, in general, it's species specific, okay? And then I guess as long as I'm talking about this, in my case, I always just, and if you looked at that one article, and we'll look at it a little bit, insects have incredible amount of pheromones. You can even, I used to have a catalog in my office that you could order a pheromone, an insect pheromone. That's how refined it is. For us, there's 2 main types of pheromones. Priming, and priming means when an animal detects a priming pheromone, it sets up a physiological event. Okay, let me do something here. Priming pheromones. Okay, yeah, anyway. Priming pheromones. Some, and I guess I don't really want you to call them releaser pheromone, okay. Because when you go out there it is. Maybe these people call it primer. But here's the kicker, here's how to remember it. Remember the P of priming, and you hook that with the physiological, PP. And physiological events take a while. So like, if you're inducing puberty in some animal, it doesn't happen then. But the pheromone is detected right now. Then the other type of pheromone for us is signaling. S-I-G-N-A-L-I-N-G. Signaling. That causes some immediate reaction, immediate behavior. Okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about bull stuff. I'm going to talk about boar stuff. This is very well documented in boars, B-O-A-R, the swine. I remember when I was at Nebraska one time, my advisor sent me out to AI this gilt that was at some hobby farm. And the people thought, that was the first problem, they had this gilt running around in their yard, basically. And I had some semen along with me that I thawed. At that time, they had some frozen semen. And I had a can of pheromone, swine pheromone. It was called boar mate at that time. B-O-A-R-M-A-T-E, 2 words. So here's this gilt running around, no other animals around, no other pigs around. I'm spraying this pheromone by its nose, but it's running around, so that's hard to wait. But some swine, when they're in estrus, if they smell this thing, they stand immobile and have an arched back. And if you ever work with swine, if a gilt or sow is in heat, you can press on their back, and they tend to lock up, and their back is arched. Well, it ends up being, never got to breed the gilt, because I don't think she was in heat, and the people probably didn't know what they were doing, but that was a signaling pheromone because it caused an immediate reaction. The physiological ones might cause ovulation in days, or puberty in days. So I always think of the P, physiological, priming, and it takes a while to initiate all this stuff. Okay. So let's search for boar meat. Let's see if it's still on the market. There it is. Now they call it hog meat. Boar odor spray. Well, it's not really for boars, it's really for gilts. And, okay, I don't know why they're saying it's for boars. Okay, there's hog mate for gilts. I'm not sure what they're talking about for boars. Boars don't need any spray, but we'll do that again. Let's see. So here it is. Detection for key detection and management of breeding pigs. Hog mate is used to determine whether or not a gilt or sow is at the stage of estrus for artificial insemination. Okay, okay, here it is. Here's how they're doing it. Proven effective in training naive boars with a dummy sow. I've done that. How many have trained naive boars on a dummy sow? Nobody? So if you're collecting semen from boars, it's really hard to do it with a live sow. It's better to have what's called a dummy sow. That's what they're calling it. What that is, it's a device that you've made, kind of rounded, a half-barrel rounded thing with canvas on top. And if you, supposedly, if you spray this stuff on there, so here's how now I'm explaining how they're using it. If you spray that boar smell on there, it's going to smell like some other boar has mated this device. And so what you do, and I mean with a naive boar, I've done it, you never 100%. I think I had 20 boars one time, and I was probably lucky to get half of them trained. If you're lucky, the naive boar mounts this dummy. None of you have done this, and I'm explaining this. But when it mounts the dummy, you have to grab the penis. You have to. And this is the hand right here that does that, by the way. You grab the penis and you squeeze because boars are sensitive to pressure, but not so much temperature. And hopefully you have a gloved hand. And I'll tell you, one of my graduate students had to do it one time without a gloved hand. You grab the penis and you pull it out. Of course, the boar's mounting this dummy, which is nice because a real animal might move. The dummy won't move because it's a nice platform. So there's some advantage to that, and the boar that's mounting won't get injured either. You grab the penis, pull it out, keep it extended, squeeze, and then you have some vesicle. Rebecca, can I use this as an illustration? So then, imagine this, and then you go like this, and sometimes you put cheesecloth over the top because some of the ejaculate is a gelatinous material. And you go, Can you imagine this? Okay, good. You fill it up, and it would fill up like at least half of this thing here. A big boar would. And then you train the boars like that. But the smellier that dummy is, the better. So that's what they're talking about. But the thing is, if you had an experienced boar, then you would get the dummy messed up with his secretions, because also what they're doing is they're chomping. And they're making a lot of saliva, and the saliva drips down. And the boar, the smellier the boar, the better. And an old boar, they're so smelly you can't use their meat for pork chops, right? I'm going to reset here. Okay, so you can't use their meat for regular pork chops or pork roast. So what's the destiny of all boar carcasses? You still make it for human consumption. Sausage. So they're all shaped in a certain place, and everything gets into sausage, because then you can hide the smell with the spices. And maybe dilute it out with some other pork, but it's something else. Okay, so that's boar team. Oh, one other. So I give you these little examples. At Nebraska, one time, one of the graduate students, not me, took this boar smell and went down the hall spraying it in our building. They were doing a little experiment, like who could smell this, because not every human can smell it. So what they did is they sprayed in the hallway, and then they waited for secretaries to walk through. Because at that time, there were a lot of secretaries. There weren't all these computers. You know, you had to hand things to a secretary. She typed it on a typewriter, you know. About 50% of the secretaries could smell it. They'll come out and go, oh my gosh, what happened out here? And then 50%, like, what are you doing? I can't smell anything. So it was really quite a little experiment. Okay, so let's talk about bull exposure now. So we did the boar stuff. Well, maybe one other thing about boars. I know it's in the article. So you can induce puberty in gilts with boar exposure. Okay? And what you do, and I've done this plenty of times, you take an old crusty boar into a pen of pre-pubertal gilts, maybe 20. And you do this like twice a day for 2-3 weeks. And if you do that to a group, and you have another, if you have a control in another building where you don't do that to, you definitely induce earlier puberty / estrus. Why do you want to do that? Because every estrus cycle that a gilt has before they're bred, they increase their ovulation rate. So if a gilt just has puberty and you breed her and she settles, she won't have as many offspring as if she would have had 2 estrus cycles and then you bred her. So 2 or 3 estrus cycles before breeding are really good, because you'll make more money, you'll get more offspring. Okay? But the older, the crustier boar, the better. Why? Because, okay, they're fighting. Okay, it's time for the treats. The crustier, the better. Okay, so then, here, Velcro. Come here. Willow, can you sit down? Oh, so good. Velcro. No, you got one. Where's the other guy? Here. So excited. Here. Oops, sorry. I almost hit your dog in the head with the penis. Okay, carry on. Okay, so then you can do this. Yeah.
So you could use that spray to induce puberty in gilts as well, right?
Okay, but if you've got hundreds of gilts, the spray could never equal that boar. I mean, if you've ever worked with an old crusty boar, that spray is like for a one-time use or whatever. It's like there's nothing to match that old crusty boar. Saliva dripping down. Oh yeah, and maybe I should say this. There's a lot of smegma. An old boar has a lot of smegma. Let's see. S-M-E-G-M-A? Smegma? You guys ever spellers? Huh? S-M-E-G-M-A? Smegma? That's a collection of secretions in the prepuce. P-R-E-P-U-C-E. Which is basically where the penis, the end of the penis is very close to before it's extended. Okay? Maybe I can show you that. The can would be like a poor substitute. Okay, let's see. Prepuce. Did you find one? He's having one. Bowl. Okay. So here's all kinds of anatomy. Okay, here we go. Perfect. Okay. So see this where it says preputial diverticulum? That's the area I'm talking about. Oh, he's got two of them? He's hugging me? Sorry. Here you go. Okay. And see where the end of the penis is back here? So the penis is always hidden until they extend it. And there's a lot of smell that comes out of this preputial area. Okay. Velcro is going to hog them all. Okay. So anyway, Kyle, the spray would be like, on a scale, it would be like 2, and the bore would be 55. I mean, there's just no comparison. All kinds of smells. Okay. And I mean, look at that's good anatomy. If you're not familiar with the bore, it has a corkscrew on the end of the penis that fits into the cervix. Okay, let's go on. Let's get back to our bull exposure. So then, if you see postpartum reproduction, that means a cow or a heifer has given birth. And they've done bull exposure on cows and heifers that are in the postpartum and estrus period. Okay, maybe I spell that out for you. Postpartum and estrus. So after birth, cattle have a period of anestrus. That means no estrus cycles. And if you raise beef cattle, you don't want that to be too long because you want a beef calf every year. Okay? And if pregnancy is 284 days, you don't have many days before you need to get the animal bred, maybe a couple of months. Dairy cattle, you can never have a calf every year. It's not quite possible. Maybe every 13 months. Okay? But it's a different situation. Okay. So they've exposed these cattle. And the other thing is, sometimes they get an effect, sometimes they don't. Let me go back to the original article. Now sometimes, this one says, results indicate an extended period to ovarian reactivation. So the thing is, you got to be careful because maybe in that case, the presence of a bull makes for a longer postpartum period. But I think I've seen results also that shorten the postpartum period. So you got to be careful. Then I think I highlighted another article about heifers. So bull exposure here, reduce the interval from calving. Okay, so there's the experiment where it says that reduce the interval. So you'll get all these crazy results that some bulls have extended postpartum period, maybe not significantly. Here, it reduced the interval to first estrus by 15 to 20 days. So you got to be careful about how you do this. It's not a perfect system. And let's see, I thought, okay, I'm carrying interval. Okay. I'm just kind of looking here. I thought, okay, sterile bulls, okay, exposure of beef bulls, sterile bulls, increase. Okay. Exposure of beef heifers to sterile bulls increases the proportion of heifers attaining puberty. Okay, so I'm not sure, and that brings up an interesting point. How do you get a sterile bull or sterile boar? Because remember how I was checking with the boar right in the pen? But you don't want any of the heifers to be bred by the boar you're checking. And sometimes that's hard. So how do you do it? Vasectomize. And that's what they're probably talking about. So if you have a bull, you want to make them exposure, but you vasectomize them. Do you know what? That has no effect on pheromone production. None whatsoever. Now the other thing is, there's another word up here of what you could also do. And they performed, and I'll let you spell that word on your notes right there. Epididimize. Epididimecticize. That's a hard one. You take the epididymis out. And what that is, good. The epididymis is on the outside of the testis. It's between the testis and the vas deferens. It stores sperm. So you could also take that out, although that's more complicated than cutting the vas deferens. But nonetheless, yeah, we're having a great time up here. Nonetheless, all the pheromones are still produced, but it's a sterile animal, okay? And sometimes you end up doing that. The dogs are having a great time with this. Okay, let's see what else can I do. Maybe I'll go to the articles that we highlighted and make any comments. Okay, so here we are, pheromones. This article, be careful because if it's about too much insect, you could just bypass it. So I would read it for general things. But remember, the insects have all kinds of categories. We're going to do priming and signaling for us, right? Priming, physiological events. Signaling are immediate behavior changes. Okay? The vomeronasal organ, yep, we did that. Behavior studies. Humans, supposedly there's pheromones in human physiology. The Flehmen response. Cats do it. Horses. I'm not sure. Is it anybody that works with swine? I'm not sure if I've ever seen a pig do the Flehmen response. It's kind of hard to tell because everything is so rigid on their muzzle. Maybe they do, but it's not quite like the horse or something that you can notice. And then here's the boar effect. Okay, yeah. And let's see what results they have. Okay, induction of synchronized estrus and prepubertal heifer or gilts by the sexually mature boar contact. Boar effect is used for more efficient estrus detection. Boar effect, okay. So they do at least 2 times a day. Okay, and I thought they'd have a result there. But anyway, that's the boar effect. And you got to be careful about the boar effect because if you do an experiment with gilts not boar effect and then with a boar, you got to make sure that the air that gets to the control group isn't being sucked in next to the barn that's got the boars, right? That can travel a lot. So it's hard to do those experiments, and I bet you sometimes if they don't find a result, it might be because the pheromones are all over. Very hard to do. But if you do enough of them, you're a believer. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. Don't let the puppies out. They're enjoying. Aren't they enjoying these things? See you Wednesday.